I think we can all agree that the Thompson submachine gun is one of the most iconic guns ever made. Even if you're not somebody who knows a ton about firearms, the Thompson's unique design is instantly recognizable. Today though, I think we need to take off our olive drab tinted glasses and take a more critical look at the Thompson's design as I share some of my controversial opinions about the Thompson from a historical standpoint. This is a continuation of my controversial opinion series, and I'd say the opinions I'll share today are controversial not because nobody out there will agree with them, but because any negative opinion about a gun this iconic is sure to ruffle some feathers. Now, an opinion that I don't think anyone could disagree with is that the Thompson is one of the most fun guns to shoot, and it's one of the best looking guns out there. It's a holy grail item for any military or firearms collector. Today, I'll be using this commercial M1 Thompson from Auto Ordnance to demonstrate my points. Now, even though I love the Thompson from a collector's standpoint, let's get into my first controversial opinion about its use during World War II, which is that for its time, the Thompson was just way too heavy and inexplicably awkward compared to other submachine guns. The Thompson is about as comfortable and ergonomic as stepping on Legos. Poor ergonomics is something you might expect from a cheaply made submachine gun stamped from sheet metal, but for the Thompson? When you look at the Thompson, it just looks like it was designed to be comfortable to shoot. Just look at all those subtle curves in the wood furniture. It really is a beautiful gun. But for reasons I don't understand, those curves seem to make the gun less comfortable, if anything. Just take a look at this weird angle on the butt of the Thompson. Most other guns either have a flat butt or the butt is angled like this a little bit so you can kind of rest it on top of your shoulder while you're firing. Some even curve a bit to match the natural shape of a human shoulder. But the Thompson said, screw that, let's angle it the opposite way so that it's constantly sliding down your shoulder when you try to shoot it. And as a bonus, if you get it high up on your shoulder, this little protruding part at the bottom will just be awkwardly poking into your shoulder while you shoot it. Unlike those pesky butt plates on other guns that are, you know, shoulder shaped. The Thompson is also incredibly heavy for what it is. It's heavier than the M1 Garand, which is kind of known for being a big heavy rifle. And not only is the Thompson heavier, its center of gravity is much further away from you when you hold it, so your arms are actually doing more work trying to support it. That makes it feel even heavier than it already is. The length of pull on the Thompson is also what some might call ridiculous. The length of pull is the distance between the trigger and the butt plate. This is important because it dictates how far away from you you'll be holding the gun while you're shooting it. According to Wikipedia, a length of pull of around 13.5 inches is what's comfortable for most shooters. And the Thompson's length of pull is 17 inches. When I shoulder a Thompson, it feels like the gun is like comically far away from me, like I'm having to reach my arms all the way out to hold it. It's just kind of awkward in my opinion. Check out the distance between the trigger and the butt plate on this Thompson compared to an M1 Garand. Why? I just don't understand it. I think the foregrip on the Thompson is even worse. To hold this thing, my arm has to be almost fully extended just to get a good grasp on it. Combine that bit of awkwardness with the gun's high overall weight and the drop stock on the Thompson, and you have a recipe for a very uncomfortable submachine gun. These are pretty minor things if you're shooting the Thompson at the shooting range. I mean, you can tell how much fun I had shooting this thing. But I don't think this is the gun I'd want to go to war with and carry around all day, every day. In my opinion, the coolness factor of the Thompson helps outweigh the poor ergonomics. Like, yeah, this thing isn't sitting in my shoulder super comfortably, but the badass look of it gives me an automatic XP boost. Let's get on to my next opinion about the Thompson, which is that it's just overly complicated and way too expensive. Even though they made simplifications to the Thompson's design during World War II, it wasn't enough. At the start of World War II, a Thompson cost somewhere around $200 to produce, which in today's money is about $4,500. With some design simplifications and economies of scale, that cost was greatly reduced during World War II, but the Thompson was still way more expensive than the submachine guns used by most other countries. It was pretty obvious at the start of the war that the Thompson was overly intricate, so the government got to work removing all the bells and whistles from the early models of the Thompson to create the M1 and later M1A1. This did help to reduce the cost and machining time of the Thompson, but I think it could have been simplified even further. So I know what you want to ask. If I were in charge of simplifying the Thompson during World War II, what areas would I look at in order to reduce the weight, cost, and machining time of this gun? And if you weren't asking that, too bad, because I'm gonna tell you. I have no clue if these ideas would work or if they'd even reduce the cost at all, but these are the areas I'd start by investigating if it were up to me. First off, can we get rid of the select fire capability? I mean, it's a submachine gun. If you flip it off full auto to semi-auto, you basically have an M1 carbine that's heavier, less powerful, and more awkward to use. There's a reason why so many other subguns of the time were full auto only. I just don't think the semi-auto selector is that important. I would say eliminate that small amount of cost and weight by just getting rid of that semi-auto option. Next, I would replace this wooden stock with a folding or retractable metal stock that would be cheaper to produce. I already covered my reasons for why I think this stock kinda sucks, but to recap, this long stock is the reason for that long length of pull I talked about earlier. The stock has a significant drop to it, which causes more muzzle rise when you're firing in full auto. This wood stock adds unnecessary weight to an already heavy gun. And the curvature of the butt plate here makes this stock uncomfortable to shoulder. It seems like the option of using a metal stock on the Thompson was explored at one point, but I don't think anything ever came of that. Finally, I would have done away with this wooden foregrip altogether. I think this style of horizontal foregrip was an improvement over the earlier vertical ones, but it's still just kind of awkward and unnecessary in my opinion. If you remove this, the user would have to hold the Thompson somewhere around the mag well like this. Or maybe they could add some small feature here to protect the user's hand instead of this long foregrip. But this would save cost and reduce weight. And before you say, oh, you can't hold it by the magazine well because it'll explode and it'll jam. There are plenty of other submachine guns that you hold in that area and it was never a problem for them. This front area of the gun is the most important part to decrease the weight of because it's the furthest away from you when you shoulder the gun, so it has a larger lever arm. I think even a small reduction in weight in this area would make a noticeable difference to the user. This would also allow you to reduce the barrel length. I don't know that that would always be a benefit, but I'm sure there are some troops who would have loved to have a short-barreled version of the Thompson. And to be clear, the Thompsons used in World War II already had a shorter barrel length than this one, so I'm talking about having like an 8-inch barrel on this thing. Again, just a possibility. I don't know how that would have gone over, but it's an idea. Now maybe those improvements are only obvious in hindsight because I have the benefit of knowing what features were on other submachine guns of the time, like the M3 grease gun, which would come around and replace the Thompson during World War II. I'd like to think that soldiers would be pretty happy with my imaginary Thompson design that probably would have all kinds of issues. Now let's get on to my third and final opinion. This one kind of explains some of the other opinions that I shared earlier, and that's that the Thompson was an extremely well-designed and practical gun for the time when it was designed. By the time World War II broke out though, the Thompson was already seriously outdated. The Thompson was invented in 1918 at the tail end of World War I, and it shows in the gun's design. The Thompson's design has more in common with World War I submachine guns like the MP-18 than it does with its contemporaries in World War II like the MP-40 or the Sten. I'm hoping this opinion shouldn't be too controversial considering that the Army itself was already looking to replace the Thompson when the US entered World War II. By April of 1942, just 4 months after the US declared war, the Army had already identified a potential replacement for the Thompson and they began testing the M2 Hyde. The M2 Hyde was planned to replace the M1 Thompson, and it did go into production, but production problems with the Hyde combined with the adoption of the M3 grease gun just after that killed the Hyde before it ever got issued to US troops. I do think the M2 Hyde would have been an improvement over the M1 Thompson in some areas, but at what cost? The Hyde might just be the ugliest submachine gun ever made, especially when you compare it to the Thompson, which is just so sexy. At the end of the day, no gun design is perfect, and the Thompson's performance on the battlefields of World War II is what solidified it as one of the most iconic guns in history. I don't know if I would have chosen the M1 Thompson to take into battle over some of its contemporaries if I were given that choice, but I do know that I would choose the M1 Thompson over pretty much every other gun to have in my collection. Don't let the opinions I shared about the Thompson's design make you think I hate this gun or something like that. The Thompson is one of my favorite guns of all times in terms of history and coolness factor, but the design just wasn't as practical as some other submachine guns. But I think it's fun to look back at designs like this using all the information we have access to today to talk about how the design could have been improved and what could have been done differently. This civilian model Thompson was probably the most fun gun I've ever taken to the shooting range, and it pays homage to those Thompsons that US soldiers used in World War II. See you in the next one.